My family stole my inheritance, so I took them to court, and they still tried to lie. My name's Alex Crane, I'm 29, and I work as an auto mechanic in a little town in Nebraska you've probably never heard of. My dad passed away 2 weeks ago. Heart attack. Just like that. No warning, no buildup, just gone. One moment I was texting him about an old Buick Regal someone dropped off at the shop. Next thing I knew, I was standing over a fresh grave, holding a folded-up obituary and wondering how the hell everything could just stop. We weren't rich. My dad was a simple guy. No stocks, no big investments, no fancy trust funds. But he owned his house, about 40 acres of farmland that he mostly leased out to a neighbor, and a modest but impressive collection of rare coins he kept in a wooden display case. He wasn't flashy, but he was solid, responsible, the kind of man who fixed things instead of replacing them. I always thought I was the same way. After the funeral, I expected there'd be some sort of meeting. You know, the classic reading of the will moment you see in movies. Me sitting down with a lawyer, maybe some extended family awkwardly sipping coffee, while someone in a suit tells us how Dad wanted things divided. I wasn't expecting anything crazy, but I figured, being the only kid, I'd be hearing something soon. But nothing happened. Not the next day. Not the next week. No calls. No letters. No emails. Just silence. It started to feel weird after about 5 days. I told myself maybe the lawyer was just busy or tied up with probate stuff. So I called around. Tried the number of the old guy Dad had mentioned once or twice. Some attorney named Charles Evans who handled a lot of estate stuff in town. Got his assistant instead, who told me, after putting me on hold for a suspiciously long time, that they weren't handling anything related to my father. Which made no sense. I tried calling my mom. We haven't spoken much in the past few years. She and Dad split when I was 21, and it wasn't exactly clean. She moved out to Lincoln with a guy named Dennis and kind of fell off the radar. I didn't hold a grudge, not really, but we were never close again after that. Still, I thought she'd at least have some information. I got voicemail. Left a message. Never heard back. I called again the next day. Still nothing. Then I tried Uncle John, Dad's younger brother. He lives about 30 minutes outside of town and was one of the pallbearers at the funeral. He didn't pick up either. Sent me to voicemail with that same default robot voice like he didn't even bother recording his own greeting. I left a message. Said something like, "Hey John, it's Alex. Just wondering if you know anything about Dad's will or estate stuff. Give me a call when you can." No call came. At first, I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Grief does weird things to people. I'd already taken a few days off work, and I was just kind of pacing around my apartment, checking my phone every 10 minutes, refreshing email like a lunatic. But then I started thinking about the funeral. How weird Mom was acting. Not emotional, just quiet. Not the normal kind of quiet you'd expect from someone mourning a man she was married to for over 20 years. She didn't look at me during the service. Barely acknowledged me when I walked over to thank her for coming. She was wearing this navy blue dress, not black, which struck me as strange. When I tried to make small talk after the burial, she just nodded and walked away. And Uncle John? Same thing. Cold. Detached. No hugs. No real conversation. Just a quick handshake and something about taking care of things in time. I figured he meant helping settle the estate, but now I wasn't so sure. After 10 days of nothing, I finally drove out to my dad's place. It felt wrong pulling into the driveway with no truck parked out front. His old red Dodge had been sold already, apparently. I didn't even know who bought it. The house looked the same on the outside, but the inside felt hollow, like someone had gone through and emptied out the soul of the place. Furniture was rearranged, drawers half open, boxes stacked in corners like someone was in the middle of moving things, but not living there. No one answered the door, but I still had the spare key. I let myself in. The place was empty. Like, completely empty. Pictures gone from the walls, kitchen stripped down to basics, coin collection missing from the old wooden cabinet. That one hit me hard. Dad was obsessed with those coins. Kept them clean, labeled, all in protective sleeves with little notes about where he got each one. The whole case was gone, and so were the shelves that used to be mounted above it. I checked the bedroom. Empty. Even the closet where he kept his old photo albums was cleared out. I just stood there in the middle of the living room, turning in slow circles like maybe I missed something. Like there was a hidden note or a document taped under the table. Something. Anything. That would explain why none of this made sense. But there was nothing. The next day, I drove out to Uncle John's place. Small ranch-style house off a gravel road. Same one he's lived in since I was a kid. His truck was parked out front. Lights on inside. I knocked 3 times. No answer. I waited a few minutes and knocked again. I could hear a TV playing inside. Voices. Movement. He was home. He was deliberately ignoring me. I shouted, "John, I just want to talk. Please." Nothing. I stood there for another 5 minutes, feeling like a damn fool before finally getting back in my car and leaving. Now I don't know what to think. It's been over 2 weeks since we buried my dad. 2 weeks of silence. No lawyer. No documents. No explanations. My mom's ignoring me, Uncle John's dodging me, and the house is gutted like someone's already claimed everything. Something's not right. I can feel it in my gut, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they're hiding something from me. Or worse, if they already took something from me. So a few days after finding the house practically gutted, I went back again. This time not out of confusion, but because I needed answers. I drove straight from the shop after closing and pulled into the gravel driveway just past 6. The air had that late autumn chill, gray lights slanting low, and the place looked even more hollow than before. The garage door was wide open, and it hit me like a gut punch. It was completely empty. No tools. No shelves. No bins with random nails and screws like Dad always had stacked in the corners. Just bare concrete and a few oily stains where his old riding mower used to sit. Dad loved that garage. He spent half his free time in there. There were always half-finished projects, old car parts, some engine hoisted on a chain waiting for a rebuild. He used to joke that it was his second living room. Seeing it stripped to nothing made something cold settle in my chest. I parked and walked up the path to the front door. Before I even knocked, it swung open. Uncle John was standing there in a pair of old jeans and a faded sweatshirt with a truck rental logo on the sleeve. He looked surprised to see me, but not in a good way. "Oh," he said, his voice flat. "Alex." I didn't even bother with pleasantries. I looked past him into the house and saw more boxes, this time labeled. Some with marker scribbles like linens or kitchen, others just blank. A few were taped shut already, stacked near the entrance. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping forward. John didn't move from the doorway at first. Then he finally stepped aside, letting me in. "We're clearing the place out," he said. "Your mom wants to get it ready for sale." I stood in the middle of what used to be the living room. The couch was gone. The recliner where Dad always fell asleep watching football was gone. The rug was rolled up and leaning against the wall. "For sale," I repeated, still trying to make the words make sense. "When was that decided?" John gave me this half shrug like it wasn't his decision to explain. "After the funeral. Your mom wants to move on. There's nothing here anymore, Alex." I turned to him, trying to keep my voice steady. "What about Dad's stuff? His coin collection?" "There's nothing," he said. "Your father didn't leave anything behind." That's when I knew something was wrong. Not suspected. Knew. Dad would never have left without dealing with his coins. That collection was his pride. He started it when he was a teenager. Used to show me each piece like it was sacred. Morgan dollars, Barber halves, some early gold coins he'd gotten from auctions. He even had an 1804 draped bust replica. Not real, obviously, but it still meant something to him. Selling those coins without telling me. No way. And more than that, he'd told me, more than once, that he made a will. I remember the last time clearly. It was the summer before he passed. We were sitting out back, having a beer. He brought it up out of nowhere, said he had everything sorted. Said not to worry if anything ever happened to him, because it was all written down. So when John looked me in the eye and said there was nothing, I stared right back. "That's not true," I said. "He told me he made a will." John exhaled slowly and walked over to one of the half-packed boxes. He grabbed some bubble wrap and started wrapping a picture frame like we were just talking about the weather. "Well," he said, "maybe he was planning to, but we haven't found anything. No documents. No lawyer. Nothing." "That doesn't make sense," I snapped. He told me. He said it was taken care of. "People say a lot of things," John replied without looking at me. "Your father was getting older. Maybe he meant to get around to it, but..." I cut him off. "No." He told me he already had. He even joked about how boring the lawyer was. Said the guy put him to sleep halfway through the paperwork. John didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he glanced at me and said, "Look, I don't know what you want from me. Your mom's handling it. If there was something, I'm sure she'd let you know." That was the moment I realized this wasn't some oversight. It wasn't that people were just grieving and disorganized. This was intentional, calculated, like I was being deliberately kept out of the loop. I walked through the rest of the house. Not a single trace of Dad's handwriting. No ledgers. No receipts. No coin books or binders. Even the old safe in the hall closet, the one with the stiff lock, was gone. It used to be bolted to the floor. The marks were still there where someone had pulled it up. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the empty space where the coin cabinet had been. That cabinet was custom-built, oak with glass doors, drawers lined with felt. I remember watching Dad dust it like it was a museum piece. Now there was just a bare stretch of wall and a faint square of discoloration where the sun hadn't touched the paint. John came in behind me. "I think you should go," he said. His voice wasn't angry, just final. I didn't argue. I just nodded and left. But I didn't drive home. I sat in my truck at the end of the long gravel drive for nearly half an hour, hands gripping the wheel, mind racing. This wasn't about grief. This wasn't about logistics. Someone had gone through the house like they were scrubbing it clean, like they were making sure nothing was left behind that could prove anything. They wanted me to believe Dad left nothing. But I knew better. And now I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd started dividing things before the dirt on his grave had even settled. A few nights after that confrontation with Uncle John, I found myself nursing a beer at McCullough's, the only real bar in town that didn't smell like deep fryer grease and regret. It was a quiet Wednesday. The regulars were slouched over their usual stools, some game show flickering on the TV nobody was watching. I wasn't even sure why I came, honestly. I didn't want to go home. My head was buzzing, and it wasn't from the beer. I kept replaying everything. How fast the house was packed, how quickly they'd all gone silent, how they looked right at me and lied without blinking. I was on my second bottle, still staring at the label like it might give me answers, when I heard the scrape of boots against the floor and someone pulling out the stool next to me. "Alex," a voice said. I turned, and it took me a second to recognize him. Mr. Higgs. Real name Walter, but nobody ever called him that. He'd known my dad for 40 years. They met back when Dad worked his first job at the grain co-op. Higgs was older, retired now. A wiry guy with sharp eyes and a raspy voice from decades of chain smoking and arguing with people who didn't know how to fix their own tractors. "Hey," I said, trying to sound neutral. We hadn't talked much since the funeral. He'd been there, standing near the back, hat clutched in his hands like a prayer. "You holding up?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "Trying." We didn't talk for a while. Just sat there. He ordered a whiskey, drank it neat. Then he asked if I'd heard anything yet about the will or the estate. I told him no. I didn't go into detail, just that things felt off. He gave me this long look, like he was weighing whether to say something or not. Then he leaned in a little closer and spoke low, like he didn't want the bartender to overhear. "I saw your old man the week before he passed," he said. "Came by the shop to drop off that busted carburetor from his generator. Said it had been sitting too long." I nodded. I remembered that generator. He'd bought it after the big ice storm back in 2014, said he wasn't going to freeze in his own damn house again. Higgs went on. "We got to talking. You know how he was. Grumbled about the weather, asked about my son's kid, told me his back hurt more than it used to. But then he said something strange." I set my beer down. "What do you mean?" "He said he'd just finished updating his will. That he'd found a new lawyer in Lincoln. Young guy, someone who'd helped a friend of his set up a trust. He said, and I quote, I put it all in writing this time. Every damn acre, every dime, every coin. It's all going to Alex. He's the only one who never asked for anything while I was alive." The words hit me like someone dropped a brick on my chest. I stared at him, trying to make sure I'd heard right. "He said that? For real?" Higgs nodded. "Swore by it. Said he was tired of the way people sniffed around him. Said he was sick of being treated like an ATM with a bad heart. Said you showed up, helped him fix the water heater without being asked, and never once hinted at wanting something in return." I sat back hard, the bar stool creaking under me. My mind was spinning. I thought of how fast Mom and John had moved, how everything had been packed, how the coin cabinet disappeared overnight. And now this, confirmation. My dad did update the will. He did intend for me to have everything. Did he say the name of the lawyer? I asked, already reaching for my phone. Higgs shook his head. "No, just said the guy was good and didn't waste his time. He was supposed to go back the following week to pick up the finalized paperwork." My throat went dry. "That was the week he died." He nodded again, slower this time. "I didn't think much of it at the time. Just figured you'd hear about it soon. But when I saw that your mom and John were already emptying the place, well, I started to wonder. Wonder. That was putting it lightly. I felt like the floor under me had cracked open. My father had made his intentions crystal clear. And now I was being fed a line about how there was nothing left, how no will was found, how I should just walk away like none of it ever existed. But it did exist. At least it was supposed to. Which meant someone either made sure it disappeared or never let it be finalized. Or worse. I looked at Mr. Higgs, and I could tell he knew exactly what was going through my head. "I don't want to stir the pot, son," he said. "But I knew your dad a long time. He wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a coward. If he said he was doing something, he damn well did it." I nodded, trying to hold down the bile rising in my throat. I thanked him, paid for both our drinks, and stepped outside into the night. The cold didn't hit me right away. I was too busy thinking about every lie I'd been told the last 2 weeks. Every dodged call, every locked drawer, every word out of John's mouth about how nothing was left. They weren't just lying. They were hiding something. And now I knew it. The next morning, I got up early and drove into town, straight to the law office where my dad had always done his paperwork. A modest brick building wedged between a florist and a failing insurance agency, with the same wooden sign that had been hanging there since the 90s. Evans and Morley, attorneys at law. I'd been there with Dad once, years ago, when I was still in high school. Back then, it had felt like just another boring adult place with dusty books and ticking clocks. But this time, my heart was pounding like I was walking into a courtroom. I didn't have an appointment, but I didn't care. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a perfect blonde helmet of hair, recognized my last name right away and told me to wait. After about 10 minutes, an older man in a gray suit appeared from the hallway. Charles Evans himself. He looked exactly like I remembered, stoic, slow-moving, with those watery eyes that always seemed one step behind whatever was being said. "Mr. Crane," he said, extending a hand. "I was sorry to hear about your father. He was a good man." I nodded, shook his hand, and followed him into his office. The place hadn't changed. Same old wood paneling, same ugly green carpet. He sat down behind his desk and folded his hands like he was about to deliver a sermon. "So," I began, trying to keep my voice calm, "I came by to ask about my dad's will." "Yes," he said, nodding. "We do have a copy of your father's will on file. Signed in 2012. I stared at him, already knowing something was wrong. 12 years ago. He nodded again. "Yes. Dated May 3rd, 2012. Standard document. Leaves all personal property, assets, and land holdings to his wife, your mother." I sat back. "But they divorced in 2017. Evans gave a little shrug. "He never updated it with us after that. If there's a more recent version, I'm afraid we don't have it here." That didn't make sense. I leaned forward. "Are you sure?" "I was told he was working on a new will just days before he passed. He told people he'd updated it. That everything was going to me." The lawyer blinked slowly. "I can only tell you what's in our system. We have no record of a new filing. No documents submitted. Nothing signed." It felt like the air had gone out of the room. I rubbed my jaw, trying to focus. But if he did come here to work on something, would there be a log? Like a note or an appointment record? Evans looked over at the computer on his desk, but didn't touch it. If he had scheduled something, it would likely be in our calendar. But I don't personally recall him coming in. Before I could push further, a younger voice spoke from the doorway. "Actually, I saw him," someone said. We both turned. It was Darren, the assistant. I recognized him from the front desk. Clean cut, probably no older than 30, wearing a button-down shirt and a tie that didn't quite match. He looked a little nervous, like he knew he was stepping out of line. "I was working late that Tuesday," he continued. "Week before Mr. Crane passed. He came in around 5:30. Said he wanted to discuss changes to his estate. I remember because I stayed late locking up after." Evans looked mildly annoyed, but he didn't interrupt. Darren went on. "He brought a folder. Said it had updated instructions and some paperwork from another office in Lincoln. I told him Mr. Evans had already gone for the day, but he said he'd stop by again before the weekend." I turned back to Evans, my pulse kicking up again. "So he was here." Evans gave a tight nod. "If Darren says he saw him, then I won't dispute it. But we never received anything official. No new documents. No changes logged." "But he brought papers," I said. "He had a folder." Darren nodded. "Blue, I think. Looked thick. Said it had everything he needed to finalize." Evans was silent for a long time, then finally said, "If he brought external documents and never came back, then it's possible they never left his possession. If he passed before filing them officially, they may have never entered probate." I stood up. My hands were shaking. "And if someone else found those papers first?" Evans didn't answer. He just looked down at his hands, folded neatly on the desk. I walked out without another word. Darren caught my eye as I passed the front desk and gave me a quiet nod, like he knew exactly what I was thinking. I sat in my truck for a long time afterward, watching the town go about its usual business, traffic crawling past the gas station, a kid skateboarding near the old pharmacy, someone raking leaves in front of the hardware store. Somewhere, there was a folder. A blue folder full of everything my father had planned. Instructions, details, proof, and someone had made damn sure it vanished. A few days after that visit to the notary, I couldn't take the silence anymore. My stomach felt like it was filled with rusted bolts and battery acid. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my dad's hands flipping through that folder, setting things in order for me. And every time I opened them again, all I saw was plywood and empty drawers. I had to see the house one more time. Not for closure. There wasn't going to be any of that, but because I needed to look them both in the eye. I needed to stop pretending this wasn't what it so clearly was. When I pulled up, her car was in the driveway. Uncle John's truck too. The porch light was on even though it was still daylight, and the curtains that used to hang unevenly on the living room window had been replaced with something beige and straight-edged. There were new doormats, a wind chime, a couple of those fake plastic flower pots near the steps, like they were trying to clean up guilt with landscaping. I didn't knock this time. I let myself in with the old key. The second the door opened, I heard voices in the kitchen. She was laughing. My mother. The same woman who hadn't returned my calls in 2 weeks. Laughing like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't living in the house of a man she divorced years ago, surrounded by boxes of his things that she had no right to touch. They both stopped talking when they saw me. I didn't say anything. I walked straight past them, through the dining room, down the hall, and to the basement door. I heard Uncle John call my name behind me, but I didn't stop. I took the stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering in my throat, and when I reached the bottom, I froze. The safe was gone. I knew that already. What I hadn't seen last time, what I hadn't looked close enough to notice, was the plywood. An entire section of the wall where the safe used to be had been crudely covered up. Plywood bolted across the studs, paint not even dry around the edges. No explanation. No reason to cover that part of the wall unless there was something behind it someone didn't want found. I walked up to it and pressed my hand against the wood. It was rough and new. No dust. No cobwebs. I could still smell the hardware store chemicals on it. Behind me, footsteps came down the stairs. "What the hell are you doing, Alex?" my mother said. I turned. She was standing on the second-to-last step, arms crossed, wearing a fleece pullover like she'd just gotten back from a fall craft fair. John stood just behind her, silent, unreadable. I didn't bother pretending. "What happened to the safe?" "It was removed," she said. Her voice was flat, detached. "Why?" "There was nothing in it." I walked back across the room toward her. "That's a lie." "Excuse me. You don't just remove a bolted-down safe and then patch the wall like this unless you're hiding something. You don't go silent for 2 weeks. You don't empty out a man's house before the obituary even runs. And you sure as hell don't pretend he left nothing behind when everyone knows he changed his will." John spoke up finally. "Watch yourself." I ignored him. "You think I'm stupid?" My mother took a deep breath and stepped fully off the stairs, looking me dead in the eye. "Your father was confused," she said. "He wasn't thinking clearly. He was talking about making changes, yes, but he didn't understand what he was doing. That's convenient. It's the truth." "No, it's not," I said. "You're standing in the house he built, living in it like you didn't tear this family in half. You think just because he was quiet and polite when you left that meant you could come back and take what you want." Her expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered. Just for a second. "That was enough. I know he went to the lawyer," I said. "I know he had the documents. I know he told people he was updating everything so it would go to me." She didn't answer. "You destroyed it, didn't you? You found the folder. You knew what he wanted, and you erased it." Still nothing. I stepped forward again. "Say it. I want to hear you say it." Finally, she looked away. "He wasn't in his right mind," she said. "He was talking nonsense. Paranoid. Angry. He thought we were all trying to take from him. He didn't mean it." "Yes, he did," I said. "He meant every word. You just didn't like where it left you." For a long second, nobody moved. Then John stepped between us. "You've said your piece," he said. "Now get out." I looked at my mother one last time, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I turned and left. Didn't say anything. Didn't look back. As I drove away, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It wasn't about coins or documents or even land. It was about the fact that the people I thought I knew, trusted, even if I didn't like them, had looked me in the face and decided I didn't matter. They didn't erase a will. They erased me. The memorial dinner was held at the VFW hall just outside town, the same place they used for every birthday, retirement, and graduation in our family for as long as I could remember. Wood-paneled walls, folding tables with those scratchy plastic tablecloths, crock-pots lined up on long tables like some Midwestern buffet of grief. People brought potato salad, deviled eggs, green bean casserole, all the usual suspects, like we were celebrating a holiday and not trying to pretend my father wasn't slowly being erased piece by piece. It was supposed to be about remembering him. That's what the little cards on the tables said. "In loving memory of Charles Crane." They had a photo of him fishing at Branched Oak, wearing that ratty old windbreaker with the frayed collar. I stared at it for a long time before I walked in. Everyone was already there by the time I showed up. I saw my mother near the far end of the room, laughing softly with Aunt Lorraine. Uncle John stood beside the coffee urns like he owned the place. My cousins were scattered across the tables, picking at pie, half watching the slideshow of photos someone had slapped together in PowerPoint. Dad as a kid, Dad in the Navy, Dad in his wedding tux, holding me in the driveway when I was 2 years old. None of them knew what he'd done in the last week of his life, what he tried to do. They were eating and smiling like it hadn't all been stolen. I made it to the center of the room before I stopped. I looked at the framed photo on the display table, Dad sitting in the garage, holding a screwdriver, grinning like someone just made a joke he wasn't going to repeat. Then I turned toward the crowd and said, loud enough for every fork to pause midair, "My father changed his will." A few heads turned. Conversations quieted. I didn't wait for someone to respond. He changed his will the week before he died, I said again. He told people. He visited the lawyer. He said everything was going to me. Because I was the only one who never asked him for anything. The room went still. I looked straight at John. And someone destroyed it. Gasps. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My mother set down her paper cup and folded her arms. I know you cleared the house out before the dirt was even settled, I said. I know the coin collection's gone. The safe? Covered with plywood. Like no one would notice. Like no one would ask questions. Nobody said a word. I took a breath, then said it plainly. You burned it. You turned everything that mattered to him into cash. His coins. His land. His tools. All of it. Like it was just junk you needed out of the way. There was a long silence. Somewhere near the buffet, someone dropped a spoon. Then, from near the back, my cousin Eric stood up. The youngest of John's kids, barely 22. He looked nervous. Pale. It was John, he said suddenly. His voice cracked. He took the coins. I saw him. Dad had me help load the cases into the truck the night before. A gasp ripped through the room like a fuse had been lit. You little idiot. John snapped, stepping toward him. Eric backed up, but he kept talking, voice shaking. He said it was his right. Said no one needed to know. I didn't think it mattered. I thought you knew. Then all hell broke loose. Uncle John lunged toward Eric, and Eric's mom tried to block him. My mother shouted something about stopping this nonsense, but no one was listening. Aunt Marla stood up screaming, asking where the money went. Cousin Tracy started yelling about Dad's fishing cabin and who sold it. I heard someone knock over a folding chair. The projector toppled, the slideshow blinked out, and the room exploded into overlapping voices, accusations, tears. I just stood there watching it unravel. Aunt Lorraine stormed out sobbing. One of the toddlers started crying. Someone threw a dinner roll. John tried to talk over the noise, but it was too late. Every eye in the room was on him now, and the way he couldn't look anyone in the face said more than anything he could have possibly explained. The wake was over. The memory of my father, what was left of it, drowned beneath the shouting. I filed the lawsuit 2 days after the disaster at the memorial. Fraud, concealment of a legal document, intentional destruction of estate records. My lawyer rattled off the charges like he was reading from a menu, and I just nodded. I didn't care about the courtroom or the strategy or the paperwork. I just wanted the truth in writing, under oath, where no one could deny it anymore. I wanted a record that said I hadn't imagined this, that my father hadn't been confused or paranoid or talking nonsense. I wanted to bury the lie they had built with something solid, something that couldn't be boxed up or burned. The first few weeks were slow, the kind of slow that makes you doubt everything all over again. My lawyer, Tom Blanchard, was sharp, methodical, the type of guy who wore old suits that somehow looked more expensive because of how unimpressed he was with them. He kept telling me to be patient, that these things took time, that we'd filed discovery requests and the court would eventually force them to provide any documentation related to the estate. But I knew there was nothing to turn over because they'd already erased it. Then, one afternoon, just over a month into the case, I got the call. It was Tom. He didn't start with hello, just said, "You're going to want to come down here." When I walked into his office, he was already standing by the window, holding a thin manila folder like it was radioactive. He didn't sit, just handed it to me without a word. Inside were photocopies, slightly bent at the corners, scanned in a rush, but legible. My name, my dad's handwriting, the notary stamp, a cover page titled Last Will and Testament, Draft Revision, September 18th, 2024. And there, in black ink, I hereby revoke all prior wills and testamentary dispositions and leave my entire estate, real, personal, and monetary, to my son, Alexander Crane. I stared at the paper, barely breathing. Tom finally said, it was in their archive. Darren, the assistant from Evans and Morley, was doing a full re-inventory of the September folders and found this one misfiled inside a client envelope for a property transfer case. It had been sealed with a batch of unrelated documents. No one ever looked that deep because, technically, it wasn't supposed to be there. Misfiled, I said, still staring. Accidentally, Tom added. Then, after a beat, according to them, it didn't matter. Not now. Because this was enough. The will had been filed. It had been received by the office. It had been stamped, witnessed, tagged for processing. It just never made it to the final docket. No signature from my father confirming the final revision, but the intent was documented. The supporting letter from the Lincoln attorney, the one Dad had consulted about consolidating his assets, was attached. And more than that, the timeline matched everything. His visit to the notary, his conversation with Mr. Higgs, his visit to the lawyer in Lincoln, all of it lined up. Tom called it a monumental procedural screw-up that just saved the case. The judge called it a clear confirmation of intent. And with that, The estate was awarded to me. Not in theory, not in moral arguments or emotional appeals. Legally, on record, the house, the land, the collection, everything. They tried to erase my father's final decision, and in the end, it was his own carefulness that saved it. Because he'd made copies. Because he'd filed letters. Because even when they thought they'd buried it, it was there, quiet, buried in the wrong place, waiting to be found. Like it knew it had to survive. That night, I sat on the tailgate of my truck in front of the house that was now legally mine. The porch light was off. The plywood was still nailed to the wall in the basement. But the silence didn't feel like absence anymore. It felt like something honest had finally come through the noise. The letters came in the same week, delivered separately, but it was obvious they'd coordinated it. My mother's arrived first. Cream envelope, neat handwriting, no return address. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery I recognized from the old cabinet in the living room, back when it was still his living room. She opened with "Dear Alex," like we were writing holiday cards, and went on for 3 paragraphs about how they never meant for things to go the way they did. "We didn't think you would find us," she wrote. "We thought we were making the best decision in a confusing time." She said she missed me. She said she hoped I would understand. 3 days later, Uncle John's letter showed up. His was typed. Of course it was. Plain white paper, basic font, single-spaced. He used the phrase, "unfortunate circumstances," 3 times. Said he was sorry things got out of hand. Said he regretted how the estate was handled. But, "We all thought we were doing what your father would have wanted." That part almost made me laugh out loud. I didn't answer either of them. Instead, I booked a listing with a regional auction house in Kansas City that specialized in rare currency and estate assets. A month later, I stood in the back of a polished room watching strangers raise numbered paddles to bid on my father's collection. The Morgan dollars went high. The gold pieces climbed even higher. The final hammer price for the lot was more than I'd expected, more than he probably ever thought they'd be worth. I took the money, paid off every cent I owed, and signed the contract for the auto shop I'd been working in since I was 21. It was mine now. Not rented. Not borrowed. Mine. New signage. New lifts. Full title. I hired 2 younger guys from trade school and gave them fair pay, steady hours, benefits. I figured I'd been handed enough legacy for one lifetime. I didn't need to hold it like a weapon. As for the house, I kept it. But I never moved in. It was clean now. Empty. The floors polished, the walls patched, the basement repaired. I had the plywood taken down, and the hole where the safe used to be rebuilt properly. I left the workshop untouched. That was the only space I couldn't bring myself to renovate. His tools still lined the pegboard. His handwritten labels still marked the drawers. I didn't want to live there. I just wanted it to exist. Some days I drive out there after the shop closed, sit on the back porch, and just let the silence sit with me. And tonight, for the first time, I brought the frame. I found it in a box after everything was settled. Just a simple oak frame, the glass cracked in one corner. Inside was a photo I'd forgotten existed. Him and me, covered in oil, standing in front of a half-disassembled Chevelle. He had his arm around my shoulder, and I was maybe 16, squinting like I didn't want the picture taken. I sat on the edge of the porch, placed the frame on the table next to my beer, and looked at it for a long time. Then I said, "This is for you, old man. They don't have me anymore." So that's it, Reddit. That's what happened. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Do you think I was wrong not to respond to the letters? Would you have kept the house, or sold it off with everything else? I'd really like to hear what you think. Let me know.